Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Omnibus Show. Today's guest is John Leonard, who is the co-founder and event director of Artomobilia. And we're going to talk about wonderful world of cars. And John, it's great having you here today.
Yep. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Well, fabulous. Well, starting out on Artomobilia, can you tell us about Artomobilia and the history?
Sure.
And how you got it started?
Yeah. So Artomobilia is one of the original City of Carmel events. At the time it started back in 2008, there were probably maybe 12 or 14 separate events. And then over the years, some of them worked, some of them didn't. And Artomobilia stuck around. Its original mission was to bring people into the Carmel Arts and Design District. And I think to a large degree that's worked, right? I think the mayor had the original idea of, hey, bring out people to different events, and then they come back and they get a taste of it, but they have an opportunity to come back at a later time. Mm-hmm. And so certainly Artomobilia was that way. This will be our 16th year this year. We originally started, I think there might have been 35 or 40 cars. It was a pretty small operation, reasonably disorganized. But at that time, the Arts and Design District was not what it is today by any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. As I was saying, the Lurie building was the big new building, and it was nice. I mean, certainly compared to many of the other buildings that were in place at that time. But everything that you see now was mostly not there. It was a lot of gravel and chain link fence and cones. But after the first one, it was like, feels like there's something here. And so it continued on for a few years as kind of a isolated event, and we did the best we can. We had a lot of interesting cars. Early on, we had a Bugatti and Duesenbergs and a lot of neat cars from local collectors. Yeah. And so we kind of continued on, and as kind of the trials and tribulations of life occur, some of the guys that had started it found they didn't have the time or whatever, and I sort of continued on and built up a team of volunteers. Everybody's kind of a volunteer. And so it's continued to grow, which has been fantastic. Part of that, the success certainly is the City of Carmel being supportive of it and indulging us in different things that we want to do. And, we started out just on Main Street, and then we went south on Rangeline, and then we went north on Rangeline, and then we went further north on Rangeline. And so as the Arts and Design District is built out, we've accommodated the growth of the city, and the city has accommodated the growth of us. Mm-hmm. And so this year, actually, will be the first year that we're having part of Artomobilia, the Lotus Palooza area in Midtown, which we're excited about because Midtown's all new things to learn, new things to figure out. And so that it's been great.
And Lotuses are fun cars.
They're fantastic cars. They're certainly pure driving, for sure. And in that time, it's a close-knit group of car collectors in Hamilton County and Indianapolis, Marion County area. And they'd say, hey, John, Artomobilia is great, but you know what? It'd be really fun. What about a Friday night event? Okay. I mean, if I can get the support for it, we'll do it. So we started Fuelicious 6 or 7 years ago, I think maybe, 2015, whatever that math is. And over at the Lucas residence, and that was neat. That was a lot of fun. And that ran its course, and so we love the Lucas family. They're literally fantastic. Again, very helpful, willing to let us do all kinds of fun things at their home. And then some guy said, hey, what about a driving event? We should try to do a driving event. So Shift, the road rally, came to be, and that, I don't know, that's probably 6 years ago maybe. And so that's down through southern Indiana. So I've tried to make a whole weekend out of it and loosely modeling it on Monterey Car Week, which is an event that until COVID I went to every year since '94. And that's a Northern California. It's a big thing. When I started going to it, it was a reasonably big deal, and now it's turned into an enormous deal. And so, all the...
Is that where you started your interest in cars, or have you just... Was that a childhood?
Yeah, the car interest is certainly a childhood thing. I remember building models, and my dad had Porsches, and I was always kind of drawn to them for whatever reason. Mechanically, I'm not proficient at all. I can hold my own, but certainly can't do anything like some of the guys taking out engines, doing swaps, all these builds. I can't do any of that. But I always had interest in cars, and when I lived out in Southern California after graduating, got involved in some different car activities, and it was fun, liked the people. And then when we moved back, when we started a family, got involved with some guys here in Indianapolis during the F1 days. And that turned into some involvement in a downtown Indianapolis event during the Grand Prix on the Circle. And that turned into the Artomobilia stuff. And so it's been a fun, I guess we moved back in 2001, so 20 years of different car events and activities. And Artomobilia's continued to expand a little bit each year, some for the good, some for the bad, and we prune the things that aren't great and try to improve the things that are good.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. My question is, I always like favorites, or what's the event or the place you like the most? What's your favorite car?
So I'm a Porsche guy. I remember when I was looking for the first Porsche that I purchased. I think I was 35, and I was looking at Lotuses and just a bunch of different stuff. And my dad said, here's the thing, you're a Porsche guy, you just don't know it. So you ought to just go drive some Porsches and see what you think. And turns out he was right, among many things, but he was certainly right about that. And so, certainly have a love for Porsches. I like all of them. I like the old ones more than the new ones, but,
Sure.
I think that's probably a function of my age more than anything else. The new ones are pretty fantastic. I mean, the amount of power you get, the luxury. They're much larger vehicles than they were, early on. The air-cooled cars certainly are not nearly the size of the modern water-cooled cars.
Sure.
But, they're all pretty great.
What is it about the Porsche that, as your dad said, that he observed in you?
Yeah.
Was that a Little League dad thing? I love them, you'll love them.
Yeah.
Or was it like he knew that, like, the way they drove, the way they feel? Is there the aesthetic of the automobile?
It's a great question. I think, if he would have liked Corvettes and said, you'd probably be a Corvette guy, I probably would have ended up in Corvettes. But I think each car make has its own thing, right? So guys that like Porsches, if you get into an old Porsche and you sit in it and you smell it, old Porsches have kind of a weird smell to them, right? It's not a bad smell, it's not a particularly good smell, it's a distinct smell. How they drive, how they're planted, just the experience, the driving experience. I think it's hard to beat a Porsche. But guys that have Ferraris and guys that have Corvettes and guys that have Mustangs will all argue in favor of their favorite mark. And there's some validity to that. And I like all the cars. I don't want all the cars, but I certainly like them all. And I like the weird ones. We used to have at Artomobilia years ago, the DeLorean Club would come out. They'd bring out their DeLoreans.
Yes.
And if there was ever a car that was certainly an interesting one, DeLoreans fit the bill, both the Heritage and John DeLorean and the current owners.
Back to the Future.
All the stuff, right? They'd come in and they'd cruise in. There'd be like 12 or 15 of them, and they'd come in, the gull wing doors are open, and they're creeping in. And it was a sight to behold. Now, I don't have any interest in DeLoreans personally in terms of owning one.
Right.
I love the idea of them, right?
Yeah.
The whole backstory and the movie action is great. And that's kind of how I feel about most of the cars. I like most of the cars, but I don't want most of the cars. But what I do like exclusively is I like all the owners. And all the owners of what have made Artomobilia what it is, and the events that are sort of positioned around that car show. Mm-hmm. It's been a lot of fun. I've gotten to meet guys that I never would have met otherwise because our paths just simply wouldn't cross. But because I've had the opportunity to organize the car show over the years, you end up running into different people and getting opportunities to spend time with people that, again, you normally just simply wouldn't.
Sure. Well, that sounds fascinating. Well, in Chapter 2, I'd like to get into more of finding out about that personal side of the program. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in a few moments with Chapter 2 of the Omnibus Show. Welcome back to Chapter 2. We're here today with John Leonard, who is the event director and co-founder of Artomobilia. Well, carrying on from the previous chapter, John, you were talking about relationships and all these cars, and I'd love to hear the stories because I think people who are interested in automobiles, particularly this is kind of a guy's thing mostly, but there's some gals that love them too, is the story of the people and their stories behind their cars. Yeah.
I mean, when you go to Artomobilia, you think it's a car show because that's what it looks like. But what it really is a bunch of guys getting together to look and talk about their cars. And a lot of the guys, like to talk about their own cars. A lot of the guys like to go over and have other guys, hear about the car and, what you like, what you didn't like, how it left you on the side of the road, whatever the case is. One of the interesting things about Artomobilia is the scale of the show, right? So it's a big show. I think last year we had probably 500 cars. We'll probably have a little bit more this year. And so you get a lot of different people, right? Probably 1,000 owners all in between spouses and whatnot. And if you watch closely, there's a lot of interesting interactions that happen. Number one, you get guys seeing their buddies that they haven't seen since last year, or, it's been a while. And that's always fun. It's a good opportunity to get together. The other thing is that you see the older gentlemen with typically the nicer cars, the ones that everyone sort of aspires to, and the younger guys. And so there's a flow from the younger guys to the older guys about aspiration, right? Like, oh, boy, if I can ever afford a Ferrari like that, or if I can ever afford that C8 Corvette, or if I can ever, whatever the case may be. And that's real, right? I mean, whether you're 6 or whether you're 26, you see these guys with Ferraris. And you're like, oh, man, look at this thing. And it's easy to recognize. In the opposite direction is a nostalgia component, where you have these older guys with these really expensive cars, but youth is the thing that is elusive. And so years ago, when I first noticed this, there's a gentleman pulled up in a Ferrari, older gentleman, probably early 70s at the time, and he pops out of his car, and the parking is a involved process. No, we don't want to hurt any people or property. So they get him parked, and he literally leaps out of his car, walks over, and looks at this white Corvair. And the Corvair was nice, admittedly, but wasn't pristine. It had been driven. It was a enthusiast car. And, I'm kind of watching this, and he's talking to the owner, and the owner's a younger guy. And he's, pointing and telling, and so I kind of moved closer, kind of trying to overhear what's going on. And turns out this gentleman had one of these Corvairs, had met his wife in it, had dated his wife, married his wife, and they'd gone on trips, and this had been a part of his formidable years when he was younger, in his 20s, and he loved it. I mean, he was, telling all the stories, like it had some kind of, the oil gauge in that particular car, I think, had actual oil running up to the gauge, and it had blown up and shot oil on him at some point. So there's all kinds of, crazy stories about this car, but it was just like the car that he had and brought back all kinds of memories and feelings that are associated with it. And so, that, I kind of picked up on that, and if you look closely, you can see a lot of that happening.
Yeah.
The aspirational components are everywhere, but certainly the nostalgia components are a big part of it as well. And that extends to even the youngest guys. We have a gentleman that he sold his Porsche Carrera GT, but for many years he had it, and he'd bring it out. And it's a rare car, V10 Porsche. It's a $1.5 million, $2 million car.
I was going to say,
now.
that's a big purse.
Yeah, and like all the smart guys, they've had these cars for a while, and so they never paid the current market value. But that doesn't change. It doesn't take anything away from the car.
Sure.
And anyway, so he would sit these 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds in this car, and you get in a older Porsche, and it smells a certain way and feels a certain way and looks a certain way, and you could see these kids' eyes light up as these grandfatherly types are converting this 2 generations later into car enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I had that circumstance. I remember we were out in Monterey with my kids, and we were at one of the different events called Concorso Italiano, a whole Ferrari event. And one of the gentlemen, I noticed that he had Indiana plates on his car. I was like, wow. So I introduced myself. I didn't know him, but he was from here in Indianapolis, and he was like, hey, why don't you put your kids in the car? And so we've got these photos of my daughter, who's super small at the time, in this guy's car that I had literally met 40 seconds earlier. And just so happens, I was out at Motor District a couple of weekends ago, and he came up and he's like, hey, I got pictures of your daughter in my car. And I said, what? And I'd forgotten completely about it. And he subsequently sent them to me, and it was like, small tear came to my eyes as she's turning, 22. So, it's a fun thing that brings a bunch of guys that normally wouldn't be together, and it crosses almost every dimension. The common thread is there's interesting cars, but, irrespective of your economic situation, where specifically you live, we got guys that come in from all over the Midwest, some guys from Houston. It's a funny situation where how far people will go for a car event. But we have a unique one, and it's in a unique area, the Arts and Design District. I mean, you take Artomobilia and you put it in a parking lot, it's not the same. Same cars, same people, but it's not the same.
Right.
Some of the magic of that event, I think, is the volume of cars that we have in the limited space that we have. And so when you show up, I get asked all the time, where exactly is it? I'm like, well, it's on the street. You're like, well, what street? I'm like, all the streets. It's Rangeline and Main, and then down Monon Boulevard this year. And so
you're going to be on the boulevard.
We'll be closing down portions of Monon Boulevard with the part that goes south.
That'll be great.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
That'll be very beautiful.
A lot of Lotuses.
Yeah.
So it should be awesome.
That will be.
But when you see it, you immediately get it. You're like, wow, okay, I understand what it is now. They're not just parking here and there. And so, Artomobilia, a celebration of the art and design of automobiles, is really at home in the Arts and Design District. And every car is art from our perspective. In fact, last year we had the sculpture that's down on 96th Street now. Big Stutz, yellow.
Yes, the big yellow car.
And I was excited to have it, candidly, because one of the things about, Carmel does a great job with all the sculptures. And they're all neat. You drive past them, try not to wreck as you go around the roundabouts. And that's pretty cool, but the problem is you never get to see them, right? And so I got invited down to Bomar Industries where they built it down on the south side, and I was amazed at the size. It's like almost 40 feet long. It's like 37 feet long.
Yeah, it's
something
pretty
like
big.
That. It's enormous.
I've seen it.
When you get outside at the roundabout, it looks a lot smaller than that. But Artomobilia this past year was the first opportunity for people to see these sculptures up close and personal. And I think the takeaway was like, wow, this is a whole thing. It's huge. It's heavy duty. It's not just something someone threw together in a weekend. So anyway,
It's going to last a while.
Yeah. And you know, that's, again, I would never have met the guy that created that art outside of Artomobilia. Our paths do not intersect anywhere except he does automotive art and I have an automotive event. And so it's been a blessing in many ways to be able to meet all these interesting people that have some facet of their life involved with cars.
Well, John, you've met so many fascinating people. You were telling me before the show about you met somebody who
Gary.
You actually went overseas on to help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wouldn't say help them out. They let me go and and didn't complain too much. But Gary Bartlett, local collector, interesting guy up in Muncie, very nice man, and the real deal. He's in his 70s. He loads his own cars. He's got guys that work on his cars. He drives his cars. He tracks his cars, the whole thing. And going into this guy's garage up in Muncie, it is like looking at automotive history. He's got photos with him and Mario Andretti in Italy, and
Wow.
it's just one thing after the next. Anyway, he's the real deal.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Gary's fantastic. Anyway, so I said, you know, I've never been to Goodwood. I would love to go to the Goodwood reunion with you at some point. And he was like, sure, why don't you go in September? And so last year we went over there. He was over there a little bit earlier. He flies his cars over there, so he's operating at a whole different level.
Sure.
And he's got 4 GTs. The GT he had over there was, I think, 67 Mark III. So it's a road-going Ford GT. But he hangs out with the Ford guys, and they give VIPs laps of the Goodwood track between the races. And so I was just kind of tagging along to see the whole thing happen, and it was unbelievable. Literally, maybe the greatest car event I've ever been to. I mean, It was fantastic, impossibly British. You know, you've got actors being hired to run around, everybody dressed in period correct outfits.
Right.
It's all old cars that would have run back in the time that they raced out there. And so it was a lot of fun. Gary was a fantastic host, and it was certainly something I'll never forget. It was great.
Well, that's certainly testimony to your program, to your show.
And he's one of many, many, many guys that are very indulgent to me. Like, the Artomobilia is not about John Leonard, right? I'm kind of maybe the man in the middle, but no one's coming for me. Everyone, the cars are the stars, somebody said. And that's really the case. And so all these guys, you know, we have our oldest sponsor, Gator Motorsport, right? The owner of that, Young Kim. He was helping me out with cars back when he didn't have the dealership.
Yeah.
And he just had a bunch of cars, right? And so he had Aston Martins and all these cool cars. And I was trying to scrape cars together, and I said, could you bring out these cars? He's like, how many do you want? I'm like, how many can you bring? He's like, I could bring 8. And I said, we'll see you there with 8.
That's fabulous.
And so he's continued to be involved. And, you know, again, very indulgent in terms of, hey, let's try some stuff, see how it works. And all these guys that have the car collections tend to be guys that are leaders, entrepreneurs, and they understand that, like, not everything works, but you got to at least give it a shot, right? And so we try to do different things each year that expands a little bit. And so, well, we started with Artomobilia, and we've added a Friday night event, and then we've added a Sunday drive, and then we've added the rallies over the years. You know, we've added the Paloozas, Porsche, Lotus, and
the
BMW.
Paloozas,
Yeah. And again, there's nothing at Artomobilia that happens by accident. And it's not that we're planning it, but it's not like we're that calculated. It just becomes obvious that there's an answer and we need to figure out what it is. And I'll give you a great example. So we give out baseball caps at the event. And everybody that has a judged car gets a baseball cap. And if you're in one of the Paloozas, you get a baseball cap. And that's simply so that our judges, who also have yellow baseball caps, can find the owners of the cars because they'll be wearing their baseball cap, right? And so, like, small thing, people are like, why do you give out baseball caps? It's something nice to give out? I'm like, completely, there's a purpose for it. And so it helps, in a crowd of 25 or 30,000 people, helps the judges find the car owners because they'll be wearing their baseball cap. And so, again, all the stuff at Artomobilia is specific for a reason. And, we park cars in a certain way because we can fit them in reasonably. And that's changed a little bit as Carmel's expanded and the bump outs have happened and all that kind of thing. So, we try to make it a great experience. At the end of the day, it's a little bit of, for me, less of a car show and more of a great automotive experience. Whether you're coming there and you're going to get a beer and you're going to grab your kid an ice cream and you're going to look at the cars and it's well organized and, understandable, or you're a participant and you enter the car on the website and you go through the process and get the notifications and you show up at the right time and that sort of thing. Or if you're a sponsor and you come and you engage with the audience, the Hamilton County audience at large, or you're focused more on specific owners, we want everyone to have a great experience. And, the city of Carmel certainly, facilitates that with, a beautiful environment to do the event.
That's fabulous. Would you like to tell our audience about what's coming up and the events?
Absolutely. So this year we bumped Artomobilia back after Labor Day. Typically we do before Labor Day. This year in September, right after Labor Day. And so we'll have a new event, not really new, but different event called Veloce, and that is out at the Indy Exec Airport out off 32. We did an event back there in 2019. It was great. Some people say it's been their favorite event. And it's basically small plates, drinks, cars, jets, motorcycles, all in a hangar. It's a hangar party. And
The Rob Report party, right?
a bit, yeah. Well, probably not quite at that level, but certainly a great time. And it'll be all high performance, supercars, hypercars, those types of things. Probably 50 cars there. A lot of fun, 7 to 11 p.m., not to be missed. It'll be great.
That sounds great.
That rolls into Artomobilia the next day. Artomobilia, same event, larger footprint. We'll probably have 500 or 600 cars. They'll go up and down Main Street, up and down Rangeline Road. We've always had the Paloozas, Porsche Palooza, Lotus Palooza, BMW Palooza, and we've added the Monumental, which is a Mercedes-Benz Club of America event that we'll be hosting at Artomobilia. And so whether it's Mercedes or BMWs or Porsches or Lotuses that you're interested in, there's a group that's dedicated that can either show you their cars or help you understand why their cars are so fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the regular Artomobilia stuff, judge classes, European sports car, American sports car, domestic, you name it. And then we'll have corrals, enthusiast corrals. And the corrals are important because it's mostly just the car clubs, like the Miata Car Club or whatever it is. And they've got 10 or 12 guys that want to come out and showcase their cars. And we're, happy to facilitate them doing that. It's great. And then Sunday will be the road rally. We have two. It's the same route. It's just in different directions. And one will be the Mercedes-Benz Club of America Road Rally, which is called Leistung. The other will be Shift, our regular road rally. and they'll meet down on the south end of Bloomington for lunch.
Nice.
And they, again, I don't have to plan out 2 routes. It's the same route, just going in different directions. Should be a lot of fun, and that's a great way to exercise your car, meet other guys that are interested in driving, and Southern Indiana has some fantastic roads.
It really does.
And then, not to be outdone, we added one more thing to the weekend, but it's actually the 22nd of October. So doing all the rallies that we do, whether the 10,000 rallies or shift or whatever, one thing we try to do is preach safety, safety, safety. It's a rally, not a race. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to race, there's plenty of great places to do that, but the road rallies are intended to drive and enjoy with your fellow, motoring enthusiasts. So what we did is we partnered with Putnam Park down on the southwest side of Indianapolis, and we're organizing a track day for those that want to come out and really learn about their car, but more so about themselves. Everybody thinks they can drive fast until they get on a track, and then it's like, wow, there's really something here. Yeah. And there's nothing more sobering than going around with a guy who's a well sorted out driver on track and seeing the limits of the car.
Sure.
You'll never see those on a road. You'll be off in the hedge. But at the track, you can really explore the limits of the car and your own limits in terms of comfort. And so we've added that. It's called Shift on Track. That's at the end of the month. So we'll focus on the get-together the second weekend in September, and then those that want to join us out at Putnam Park can do that toward the end of the month. But it should be awesome.
That's exciting. I'm certainly going to attend. We will put their website, Artomobilia's website, with all the events in the description so that you can check it out. And it's ongoing, so if you miss one, you can go to the next one.
Yeah.
But that's exciting. Well, John, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
you
so much. It's great having you here.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, John. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the program, Hotel Carmichael. Today we're shooting at Feinstein's, and today's guest has been John Leonard, who is the co-founder and event director of Artomobilia. We look forward to being with you on our next episode of the Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.